All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your coming. Welcome to Wednesday Forum. This is a weekly discussion that is held by both the Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies, CRCS, a master's degree program at the Graduate School of Gajah Mada University in Yogyakarta, and the Indonesian Consortium for Religious Studies, a doctoral degree program, which is a consortium of 3 universities in Yogyakarta: Gajah Mada University, Islamic State University, Sunan Kalijaga, and Duta Wacana Christian University. And this is the Wednesday forum that is the second to the last, because next week will be the last for this semester. And our speaker today is Dr. Namrata Chaturvedi, who is Associate Professor in the Department of English, SRM University in Sikkim, India, and her research interests include classical Indian philosophy and literature and spiritual autobiographies. And her recent publication is an edited volume of essays on Kalisada Sanskrit drama, published by Anton Press this year. And she is going to talk about the practice of yoga that can bring about what? An act of compassion, and how can yoga be practiced to clear our minds and to benefit the way we judge the surrounding environment, and we can act compassionately. So, Dr. Namrata Chaturvedi, you have 45 minutes maximum for presentation, and the rest of the time for discussion later. And for the participants on Zoom, if you have any questions or comments, you may write down your questions or comments in the chat box of Zoom. And for those of you who are watching this forum via YouTube, you may also write down your questions or comments in the comment section of our YouTube channel, CRCS UGM. And for those of you who want to speak or turn on your mic, I will let you later during the discussion session. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Namrata Chaturvedi.
Hi, Aziz. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So my time starts now. Hi, Anshu. Thank you very much for having me here. I was expecting Dicky to be with us too. Maybe he's watching it on YouTube. So I should begin by saying that I have been fortunate to be in Indonesia last year. It was a very beautiful experience, and the most beautiful thing about the experience was meeting very, very kind, very knowledgeable, and very friendly people. And I think this talk today is possible only because of that friendship, that kindness, and that very keen interest in religious and spiritual practices without any doctrinal boundaries. Something that I observed in Indonesia, and I am very glad that I was a part of observing something like this. So the topic for today is compassion in the practice of yoga. So I should begin by making making one point right at the beginning, which is that I am not here to theorize on yoga. The world knows it as yoga, but it should be called yoga. So I will use the word yoga as it is used in the original. I will begin by saying I am not going to theorize on yoga. I will present some key ideas of yoga that I have experienced and witnessed. I am not going to make a claim to knowing yoga completely as a method, but I will only share, as the subtitle of my talk says, experiences and observations. I will only share what I know, what I have personally experienced. So this talk is based entirely on my experiences and not on any kind of a textbook understanding of yoga. I have a small presentation here, which I will begin sharing on the screen. I think we can see the full screen now, right, Aziz? So I must begin by clearing some misconceptions about yoga. I think that is some kind of a duty that I have. When I take up a topic like this, I think it's very important that I first clear some misconceptions about what yoga is, and more importantly, what it is not. That is the first thing that I would be doing. And the second part of my presentation is on compassion, on how do we relate the practice of yoga with compassion, something that the world is desperately in need of. As if for those of you who have read this abstract, you would have noticed that I will also make a distinction between compassion as a spiritual state of being and compassion as a moral compulsion. I am going to make a distinction between the two and try to demonstrate how that is very important for the world around us as we inhabit it right now, right here and right now. I will begin with first clearing some doubts about what yoga is and what it certainly is not. The first point that I want to make is that yoga is a method. It is not a religion. That is the first point that I want to make, and it's very important that all of us recognize this point. I was reading some comments on Facebook yesterday. There was a post by some colleague of mine in Taiwan, and there was a post which said that yoga has been banned from many churches, especially during this Christmas season. So the churches have completely put a stop to the practice of yoga. And I also read about many Islamic institutions and Islamic organizations in Malaysia putting a complete ban on yoga. And I was not surprised on reading this. I was very sad, but I was not surprised because of the associations that yoga has come to have with a certain religion which is trying very hard to institutionalize itself, which is what is the world is now calling Hinduism. So my point is, point number 2 and point number 4 on the slide is that yoga is not a religion and yoga is not a metonym for Hinduism. Yoga is certainly not that. The fifth point I want to make is that yoga is not based on any cult or any doctrine. In this method, there is no concept of sacred books. There is no concept of sacred places. There is no concept of monotheism or polytheism. And if anybody says that these are the concepts inherent to yoga, then you need to contest that. You don't need to believe that. Point number 3 and the last point are connected to each other, which is that the practices of yoga are specific to practitioners, but are certainly not limited to them. This is why it is not a cult. If I do a certain kind of yoga and I start my own practice, then I make you believe that I am the be all and end all of what it is and what it can be. Then that again is something that we need to contest. And a very, very fundamental aspect of this is to realize that the methods and practices are subject to evolution and adaptation with the changes in the phenomenal world. That I think is a very important point that we need to understand. So I think there is this, there has been this kind of a belief that if you want to do yoga, you have to regress in time. You need to regress in time. You perhaps need to, this Facebook post that I was reading was all about saying namaste. This Indian greeting that the world is, that our country has been exporting to the world now. This namaste. So there was this thing, discussion about when you do yoga and after a class, why do you have to say namaste, or why do you need to begin a yoga class with namaste, and what is the connection between namaste and this yoga, or between namaste and Hinduism? So there was obviously a very heated discussion there, but from what I observed, I gleaned that there are many misconceptions here. To be a yogi or to try to be a yogi, you don't need to regress back in time. You don't need to suddenly start saying namaste. You don't suddenly need to start changing the way you wear your clothes, or your greetings, or your hairstyle, or anything for that matter. So this method is completely open, subject to and ready for evolution and adaptation with the corresponding changes in the phenomenal world. That I think is a very, very important point that we must understand whenever we are starting any kind of a discussion on this. So in this first slide, I wanted to talk about what it is and what it is not. And later on, if there are any questions on this or any discussion that emerges from this, I would be very glad to take that up. Now, I want to present this. I'm not selling yoga at all here, but I'm trying to present some fundamental ideas embedded in this practice, which are universal in their appeal and in their approach. But since we're talking about a practice here, we need to understand some of the texts that highlight these practices, but these are not sacred texts. These are manuals which would help us. So we know of Patanjali, who signifies not the entire yoga practice is not signified by Patanjali, but a certain kind of yoga practice, which is most popular in the world now, was compiled and composed around 6th century BC by a sage named Patanjali. He composed sutras, which would be aphorisms on the practice of yoga, and he compiled them in a text which is called Yoga Sutra. Besides Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, there are many other texts of yoga. One of them I think is very well known all around the world, which is Bhagavad Gita. Again, a text that everybody has an opinion about. Everybody has some engagement with in some way or the other, indirect or indirect ways. People have come to know of Bhagavad Gita, something that unfortunately is being projected in a very wrong fashion as the sacred book of the Hindus. You know, it's like the Hindu equivalent of the Holy Quran, which it is not. So there are many texts besides Patanjali's Yoga Sutra which highlight certain practices of yoga. These are not doctrines, these are not theological texts, and these are certainly not sacred books. So for a Hatha Yoga practitioner, Hatha Yoga Pradipika is a very important text which would help him or her understand the practices. There are the Brahma Sutras, there is the Narad Bhakti Sutra, there is Gheranda Samhita, there is Bhagavad Gita, and besides these, there are many other texts. There are many useful texts which have been composed in much later periods by practitioners themselves. If you go to Google and type yoga books, I think you will get a million hits. There will be a series of books on yoga which would flood your screen. So there are practitioners who have written their own textbooks based on their practices, and there are many who have never practiced anything but have written many books. So there are yoga and there are yoga books and there are yogis of many kinds. Now we keep talking about yoga. What would it mean? What does it mean? This is a concept that I have experienced and not learned. Only after having experienced it to a certain extent in my limited spiritual practices, I have come to absorb this meaning. It is not a meaning that any teacher has given me. It is not a meaning that anybody has presented on the screen to me. It is a meaning that I have been fortunate enough to experience with my limited practices. So yoga literally means join, combine, bring together, or create a state of balance. That is what it literally means, join or combine. Now, obviously, a question that arises is what are we joining with what? So herein, from my understanding, I have presented these few categories of being that one can join with these spiritual practices. I have deliberately not used the words joining or combining or balancing the human with the divine, balancing man with God or woman with God or man with goddess, as the case may be. I have not used those theological words at all because they bring a baggage with them. What I have tried to show here is the act of joining, the practice of trying to join the outer self with the inner self, the gross body with the causal body, or the manifest energy with the eternal energy. The practice of yoga would it naturally makes us aware of these dimensions of our being that we inhabit. No textbook, however much it may try and emphasize this, can make us experience this until we have practiced the sadhana to whatever extent that we have been able to. So joining manifest energy with eternal energy is something that this practice of yoga naturally, slowly, gradually, and consistently takes us to. And as I stated before, yoga is not a theology. It is certainly not a theology, but it is a practice. It is a spiritual practice which aims at transformation of the human consciousness. It is a practice that is a singular aim, which is the transformation of human consciousness. And my talk today is about this transformation. Not so much about how this transformation happens, but more about what this transformation leads to. So I'll take you to the next slide. I will not dwell much on this because these kinds of things are over available on the internet. They're over available in books. They are over available in new life. What do you call them? New spiritual um, classes and cults and all. But there's a basic understanding of the yogic. There's a basic understanding of the body in yoga that I think we are all kind of aware of. I will not dwell too much on this until someone asks me to. So the yogic body believes that the human system, this outer form, this gross body, is only a manifestation of something which is more eternal, more inner, more real, which is the causal body. And this causal body consists of a layer points, certain points where our energy, what is known as prana. Sometimes in the West it is called prana. So this prana, this energy flows through these points in our causal body. They are represented in yogic symbolism with these colors. The colors which represent them range from red to something like a violet or magenta color at the top. So these are the different points which are known in yogic practice as chakras. And there are far too many. If we type chakras and chakra healing or chakra cleansing, there are again millions of things which will appear for us. Somehow this chakra, this understanding of the chakras has also become a very populist understanding. And with every other populist thing, it is becoming very superficial. I will not dwell too much on this, but here are the 7 major points. Apart from the chakras, there is the concept of nadis and many other kinds of points and systems in the yogic body. But just to present it very, very briefly, we have what is called the Mooladhara chakra, the Swadhisthana chakra, Manipur chakra, Anahat chakra, Vishuddha chakra, Agna chakra, and Sahasrara chakra. In English, they would read perhaps as root chakra, sacral chakra, solar plexus chakra, heart chakra, throat chakra, third eye chakra, and the crown chakra. Now, if we think of this as some kind of an idea or a theory, it may seem either very intriguing, very enigmatic, very mystical, or it can seem very foolish, very ridiculous, very illogical. So, if we have been practicing spiritual practices, we perhaps are already aware of this. We may not call them as root chakra or Mooladhara chakra, but we certainly are aware of energy embodied in our yogic body and running through our yogic body. That is something many of us in different parts of the world with different sadhanas are already aware of. So yoga certainly doesn't have a copyright over our energy. It doesn't mean that if we are not practicing what we call as yoga, we don't have an energy flowing through us. It certainly doesn't mean that. I personally had an experience of this. Antu will agree, was witness to this. I had a beautiful experience of this in Yogyakarta last year when I met an indigenous healer and I experienced precisely what I'm talking about. So no one has a copyright over this. Now, when we talk about different kinds of yogic practices, again, there is a misconception that these are doctrines or these are cults. Let us make, I want this occasion, I want to take this opportunity to point in this occasion that this is not true. These are different kinds of your practices, and no practice is complete and oblivious of the other kind of practice, and no practice is closed. It doesn't mean that if you are practicing Hatha Yoga, you have nothing to do with Bhakti Yoga. It doesn't mean that at all. All it means is there are different people have different temperaments. We are made of different pravritis, which are our tendencies. I am a different person. You are a different person. I experience life in a certain way, and you experience life in a certain way based on your temperament. And I do it based on my temperament, my location, my limitations, just as you do. So there are different kinds of practices that would have more synergy with us, but they certainly are not cults or doctrines and are not exclusive of each other. So I think the most I want to make this point, which is about Hatha Yoga, which I think is as you can see in this little picture, there is a posture. It's a very hard posture that this man is practicing. I think yoga has been going around in the name of postures and flexibility of the body. It has very commonly and popularly been going around in the name of postures, hard postures, harder postures, more and more unreal and unimaginable postures, and a very strict regimen of the body. It's been going around in the name of only this. Now that again would be a very incomplete understanding of what we are doing, because there has to be a purpose. Just as there has to be a method to the madness, there has to be a purpose to the madness also. We have to understand that Hatha Yoga as a system focuses on asana, on different postures, on disciplining this external body, this gross body that we have. It focuses, it believes that with greater discipline of this outer body, the experiencing self will distance itself from this body. Unfortunately, what it does is it creates an obsession with the very body that we are trying to discipline. So yoga for good sex, yoga for fitness, yoga for this, yoga for young life, yoga for good marriage, yoga for almost everything, yoga for childbearing, pregnancy yoga and partum yoga and postpartum yoga and whatnot. So therein lies an inherent irony. The idea has been that a very strict regimen of the body, so much so that your postures will be extremely painful, you will find your body twisting and writhing in pain in doing this, till you reach a point where you are disconnected from the gross body and it no longer pains you, and you can do all unimaginable things that we used to hear about yogis levitating themselves, and the with the heads on the floor and their feet up in the air, different kinds of asanas that we sometimes ridicule also. The idea was that with such a regimen of the gross body, the experiencing self, the soul, will disconnect itself from all grossness. And that will be a transformation. The point is transformation. The point is not the method. The point is not good skin or good hair or good sex for that matter. The point is transformation. So there is Hatha Yoga, which I think is largely misunderstood, very badly taught and very wonderfully packaged. There is a Bhakti Yoga. As you can see here in a picture, a man is embracing the idol of his god, of his deity. So Bhakti Yoga, as the word Bhakti would suggest, Bhakti would literally mean to remember. It comes from Sanskrit word bhaj. Bhaj would mean to utter and to remember, which would mean to utter and remember the name of your deity, the name of your Lord, the name of your God, the name of your goddess, whatever principle it may be. The importance is the principle, not the God. Not the form of the God, not the name of the God, not the color of the God. That is not the point. The God is the objective correlative of your devotion. So the deity, the statue, the ritual, the devotional singing, the bhajan, all of these things that come with devotion are means to an end. So Bhakti Yoga would would focus on a very personalized, emotional connect with the deity in a form. But again, the deity in a form is only a stage in the practice and not the end. This is when stupid theological debates, stupid cults, and stupid kind of ideas start getting discussed. My God versus your God, and this God versus that God, and these kinds of even within the idea of devotion and personalized deities. We've been witness to this. We've had factions and cults which would uphold one God, even within a particular religious tradition. This form of the deity versus that form of the deity, so on and so forth. It's again the classic case of not understanding the purpose of something and getting stuck in a stage. And when you're stuck in a stage, you can be very, very harmful for the world. The other kind of discipline would be karma yoga. Karma would mean action. And this is yoga in action. You, with your actions, which are emanations of your spiritual awareness, you can bring about a transformation of your own self and consequently a transformation of the world. And it certainly doesn't mean that a person practicing the act of devotion will have nothing to do with karma yoga. Naturally, her acts will be informed by a transformation in her consciousness. Another kind of approach is jnana yoga. Jnana would mean knowledge. And with this, there is, as the image would tell you, keeping the company of knowledgeable people, listening to the sharing of knowledge, being with teachers, being with guides, respecting teachers, engaging in what was called satsang, what would mean a company or a gathering of truth. So engaging in multiple such gatherings where there are knowledgeable people sharing their experiences with us, not intellectual acrobatics, but knowledgeable gatherings where you listen to truths being propounded from anywhere in the world. That is another way of practicing yoga. And then there is another way in which one can practice this, which is called Raj Yoga, which deals largely with the mind, with techniques of concentration, with techniques of meditation. But again, Raj Yoga does not exclude Bhakti Yoga does not exclude Gyan Yoga, so on and so forth. So, in talking about the transformation of consciousness, now I come to this part of my presentation where I will not talk about yoga itself and what happens, but what one does if one is doing it, but what happens to you if you have done it. I will talk about the effects of what this transformation of consciousness means, brings about. So, with the practice of the eightfold stages, as Patanjali in Yoga Sutra lists out 8 stages, maybe later on I can dwell on these. For now, I will move to the next slide. Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharan, Dhyana, and Samadhi, which would mean everything from a personal resolve to meditation, different stages. In a balanced manner, under the guidance of a guru, human consciousness delimits itself to experience expansion and eventually merging with the infinite. Now I come to a point where I again want to clear some doubts about this idea of a guru, which again is a very popular but misunderstood idea. Guru is, I want to propose this, that guru is not an individuated self or a person. Guru is a principle. It is a stage in the evolution of your consciousness. Therefore, the guidance of a guru does not mean adherence to a rigid cult or obeisance to a physical form or a personhood, but it is a consistent and auto-referential process where the inner self becomes your own guru. You become your own guru. You get to the stage where you are your own guru, where the inner self reminds, corrects, and balances the behavior and actions of the outer self. That is what guru means. Guru is a principle, guru is an effect, guru is a stage, but guru is certainly not a person. And anything that claims otherwise is to be avoided. Now, what happens during this transformation is what I want to talk about. What happens in this idea? When we talk about transformation, what happens? So, one thing that we experience is that the self begins to locate itself in a dimension that is beyond the gross body. The self begins to locate itself in a dimension which is beyond this. I will not say it's higher than this or lower than this, but it is beyond it. It's beyond the body. The self then begins to unattach with external coordinates of time, place, and forms. There is a consistent process of unattachment that begins. And this process, once it begins, is irreversible. It is consistent. It can be very slow. It can be painfully slow. But once it sets in, it doesn't turn back. If we are practicing, it is irreversible. A natural tendency to witness the outer self takes over. The witness consciousness is established. The experience of reality begins to recognize the limitations of the human body and the consequent limitations of the suprahuman and the suprahuman and supramental agencies therefore begin to acquire meaning. The points at which we are locating ourselves and the relationality that we are establishing with other agencies gets a wider or a bigger picture when this transformation happens. Another thing that happens is that an obsession with the rationality of the human mind, that is an acquired trait, begins to fade away. An obsession with human rationality, an obsession with the human mind, an obsession with all intellectual acrobatics that we think are enough to transform the world, that tendency begins to take a backseat. And an understanding of time begins to develop that recognizes the cyclical nature of time and consequently of phenomena as developing from a cosmic rhythm. One begins to see time not as a linear, not on a linear plane, but as a cyclical force with forms appearing and reappearing and disappearing and appearing again. One begins to observe and experience this. Even to a small extent, one begins to experience this. Now, in this transformation, what happens to human consciousness, to human emotions, is what I want to highlight. The witness consciousness that one has begun to experience doesn't attach itself any longer to emotions and the circuit of action and reaction, but it watches the emotions appearing as waves in the sea of consciousness. It is possible to observe your emotions as rising and settling down and rising and settling down like waves. Instead of attaching yourself with emotions with which you will immediately attach yourself to a chain of action reaction. If I feel something, I need to have a point to hang it on. And then I'll expect a reaction from you, and this whole thing starts. Another thing that I have learned is that the selves of others, we are capable of seeing them as results of pravritis, traits that are accumulated through our karmas. And karmas simply mean impressions and memories acquired over times and forms, lifetimes and life forms. Over our, these are set of impressions and memories that we have not been able to process in our lifetimes. And every time we get a new form, we come with a baggage. And a practice of this kind will enable me to see you as a product of this baggage. And therefore, I will not simply judge you for what you are. I will be able to see you as a product, just as I will be able to see my own self as a product. These karmas are impressions and memories. These are also unprocessed emotions, unfulfilled desires, unconcluded narratives of experience. What yoga would do is it aims to enable a processing of these impressions through a gradual and consistent process of recognizing, facing, and experiencing them, and eventually letting them go. That is what this practice would enable us to do. In the experiencing of karmas, an awakened self, a self which is practicing spiritual discipline, an awakened self is able to free itself of attached qualities of grief, happiness, pain, anger, jealousy, etc., etc. Because all these emotions are attachments to our karmas, including happiness, including sadness, including too much love, including too much hatred. All of these are attachments to our karmas. I will, because I want to complete the slides, I'll move into the other one. Compassion in practice. Now, I want to say this, that compassion is not an emotion, but the natural state of the human consciousness. So when awareness sets in, the self naturally begins to act out of this natural state. There's nothing you need to force on it. With yogic practice, one can just simply take the self to its natural state and then sit back and watch the show. If, on the other hand, if compassion is preached or imposed as a moral compulsion, it becomes an imperative. And then it becomes an emotion that will certainly root itself in some kind of an external coordinate. It could be a religion, it could be a cult, it could be a reward, it could be a fruit, it could be a person. Compassion, when it is attaching itself to something, you know, a compassionate person also expects something in return from you. One can keep arguing if Islam teaches more compassion or if does Buddhism teach more compassion. Are you more compassionate or am I more compassionate? Compassion, when it's attaching itself to an external coordinate, will certainly lead to these kinds of discussions. But when you've been able to come to the stage when you simply sit back and observe compassion acting itself out, that is a different story. As an awakened state, compassion will therefore be a natural phenomenon that will not root itself in anything, and therefore it will lead to actual transformation. The self then will not act out of ego, but out of the principle of surrender. Compassion acts itself without a person being compassionate. Compassion is not dependent on the compassionate one. Compassion is a state of being. Today, I may do an act which may be compassionate act, but certainly I am not the doer of it. Tomorrow you may do it, you are also not the doer of it, and the world functions on the principle on which it is supposed to function, rather than I claiming compassion and you claiming compassion. So how does this compassion manifest itself? One sees other human beings as fellow limited selves, but possessing an inherent capability for realizing their own limitless beings. This is how compassion will manifest itself. I, if I feel compassion for you, I don't need to run and give you a glass of water. That alone is not an act of compassion. That is perhaps an act of compulsion. You may not need water, but if I've decided I have to be compassionate, perhaps force water, down your throat. Just as many of our policy decisions are based on this very superficial understanding of compassion. Instead of this, if I have been able to experience this, I will be able to see you as being in chains, just as I am in chains. And just as I'm trying to free myself of my chains, I will also be able to see you. I will be able to hope that one day you too will free yourself of your chains. And I will not judge you for being in chains, and I will not unnecessarily be charitable towards you for being in chains. One is aware of human tendencies arising out of the effects of these cumulative impressions. One will gain freedom from the logical fallacy of judgment. I will no longer judge your actions, behaviors, and choices. Neither will I condemn you, neither will I unnecessarily love you either, or praise you either. One learns to participate in the human drama in multiple ways, as witness, as listener, as receiver, as reliever, as catalyst, and in many other ways. So one is free of the compulsion to act. As the beautiful line goes, those also serve who only stand and wait. Everybody doesn't need to act. And therein, I think a lot of our, our ideologies are informed by an obsession to act. So compassion in public life. I think I have 5 minutes. I will wind up. Compassion and public life. So at the individual level, a transformation of consciousness will begin. At the social level, awareness of this freedom will begin to spread to other people. One if you and I are engaging with each other, and I have been able to experience a slightly awakened state, it will set a chain reaction in you, just as you will set a chain reaction in me. So compassion will generate a chain reaction where the participating selves experience freedom and begin to seek it for themselves. Rather than begging you to give it to me, I will begin to seek it for myself. And that is where transformation begins. And that, I think, is a truly enabling process. Rather than asking, can the subaltern speak? Let's see, can the subaltern be free? That's the question we need to ask. Issues of injustice, power dynamics, environmental degradation, mental health, all these issues can then be seen in wholesome perspectives that recognize the interconnectedness of life forms and impressions, and we are able to understand the problem in a more complete frame. Interfaith relationships. I want to make this point about interfaith relationships. I think interfaith relationships can become interspiritual relationships, where these unnecessary discussions, theological differences, customary differences, ritualistic specificities, they can be seen as semiotic systems informed by the same universal language. Where instead of unnecessary theological debates, forced interfaith understanding, we can actually develop a true interspiritual understanding, because faith will need a believer and a believer will be an ego. So instead of an interfaith understanding or an interfaith practice, if we move towards an interspiritual practice, I think there's more that we can achieve. Otherwise, it still remains superficial and bound by ego. I want to say this, I'm at the end now. Compassion and contemporary realities. So the global culture of materialism that is developed all over the world, it sees an individual as a sum total of her external coordinates. So I am a sum total of my body, of my mind, and all my material aspects. I have a designation, I have a name, I have a, I have a gender, I have all of this. I stay in India. There's a university where I teach, and etc. etc. And what this culture does is it creates complete dependence on external phenomena. Today, you take my job away from me, and I'll probably, I'll sink into depression. I am somehow defined by being this professor, of English. You take my job away from me. You take any external reality away from me. If something changes in my body, which is constantly changing, you never step into the same river twice, as Heraclitus said. No, it's constantly changing. But when I am growing old, my hair is not black anymore; it turns white, and there you are. It's a personal crisis for me. I'm old. So what it does is it creates complete dependence on external phenomena and makes an individual anxious about change. And that is the root cause of all our psychological imbalances. And this present crisis, this pandemic, this present crisis has manifested itself more as a material crisis than as a medical crisis. This is what I have observed. It has manifested more as a material crisis where, all the chains of material transmissions have been disrupted. And therefore, everyone's in a state of panic. I can't get to work. My son can't get to school. All these chains of material transmissions that have been going around in the world, they have been abruptly disrupted, and that has led to serious crisis for people. So what has happened is people have found themselves in personal crisis because their selves are constantly shaped by external factors. And we have done nothing in our educational programs, in our social evolutions, in our religions, in our so-called faith practices. We have done nothing to let individuals root themselves in something which is beyond body, mind, and material. We've not done that. So I can't get to my temple for these for my regular pujas. My goodness, my religion is is under threat. My devotion is under threat. I can't go and see my idol anymore. My goodness, I can't celebrate my religious festival anymore. My goodness, So we've been rooting ourselves in, I think, the wrong places. So what yoga would do is it would enable the self to stay located in a higher dimension or a broader dimension, if you don't like the word higher, where the changing phenomena possess an obviousness rather than any abruptness. And I will, because I need to conclude, this is my last slide. I will just conclude now. In modern liberal discourses, the blanket rejection of spiritual methods and practices disables any meaningful engagement transformation in the classroom, in the boardrooms, or in the libraries. And I speak more specifically about my own context of what I have observed in academia in my country. Academic approaches lay overemphasis on the mind and create information overload for the learners. Humanities and social sciences can involve experience-based approaches that invite spiritual practitioners to enrich the understanding of human sciences, something that you are very creditably doing in UGM. The goals of education need to be assessed. Is education of social sciences and humanities, literature, religious studies, and liberal arts meant to lead to an individual transformation that can gradually but steadily build larger transformations in homes, workplaces, and public discourses? Or are we looking at information explosions? With this, I'll conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namrata, for your presentation. Now let's have some discussion, and I will let three people to ask or comment.
Should I stop sharing my screen? Do you think I should do that?
Yeah, you may stop yours. There are now 32 people here on Zoom, and more than 10 people are watching via YouTube. And yeah, please raise your virtual hand if you want to.
Your yogic hand.
If you want to ask questions by turning on your mic and you want to speak, or you can write down your questions on the YouTube channel, or you can write also on our in this Zoom chat box. Yeah. Mas Ancho, do you have something to say?
Yes, I just wonder, is she pretty?
She who?
Namrata, did you see her, Dr. Pretty?
Preeti should be here with us.
Hello, namaskar.
Hi, Preeti.
Is that you?
Anshu.
Hey, where is your face? Miss you.
Namaskar, how are you?
Good.
It's so nice to see you.
Ha, look at you.
Why can I not see you, Preeti? Where are you? Are you able to see her?
I see her very clearly.
Okay, I think, anyway, doesn't hi, Preeti.
I think I was practicing yoga.
Hello, how are you, Anshu?
I am so good. I'm so good. I was practicing yogic, listening to the, I think I was practicing the Jnana yogic.
Gyan, knowledge. Oh
Jnan.
yes, you are a Gyan yogi.
Jnana yogic. It's so enlightening. Thank you very much, Namrata.
Thank you, Anju.
It's like a very, it emphasizes a very rooted, not individual, but like a personal basis, like how we could understand the way to free ourselves from any attachment. I was wondering actually, Namrata, I mean, from that, you said you have a limited experiences, but just from that, what you have experienced, like what would be like the challenge of practicing it? Like a challenges that you have faced, you have experienced in, in transforming the self, understanding that we are so attached to many. We are so attached, like soon we breathe, soon we open our mind, our eyes, we see ourselves attached to it, attached to them. I was wondering, like, if you could share your experiences, like challenges of dealing with those, like thinking about the son, daughter, wife, husbands, friends, schools, and so on and so forth.
That is a very good question. Thank you, Anju, for asking this question, because this is a question that must come to us, and I cannot say that I've been able to overcome the challenges, but I am trying, like all of us are trying in our own ways. But the challenges that one faces include these attachments, which are, I think, maybe we don't have a complete understanding of what attachments mean. When I say unattached, we may think that we are talking about apathy, about not caring and not being concerned, about our the relations that we have, or the different kinds of points in which we've been pegging ourselves. The challenges for me have been to maintain a consistency of this witness consciousness whenever I have been able to experience it. The challenge has been to maintain its consistency and keep myself free of the circuit of action and reaction. And I cannot say that I've always been successful. I have miserably failed many times, but I try. I try to stay away from the circuit by observing and witnessing rather than by participating as, as the actor or the reactor. That is one very huge challenge, Anju. And consistency, maintaining this consistency is a challenge also because one requires uh, a certain time or a certain comfort available to oneself on a daily basis when one is into all these worldly practices, all the things that we needed to do from the time we wake up to the time we sleep. There are so many responsibilities and so many things that we have to do. So finding time is a challenge, but there are ways in which we can deal with. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Anju. Or maybe while I'm talking to somebody else, I may answer. If I think I may need a little time in answering this.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
If I could add a little bit, it just come up in my mind. I'm trying like to understand, also sometimes experience it. Like I'm in paradoxical situation, like stage when at the same time, when like at the time I try to have myself like understanding, to liberate myself like from any, to understand like the real self of mine. But at the same time, I'm also like in need in relation to others, to other self. Like engaging the relationship through which, engaging the outer self. So I found it like a, sometimes like paradoxical situation.
Could you elaborate this paradox? Could you elaborate this paradox a little bit?
Like between myself being unattached, to liberate myself, and in order to experience, the transformation, like where I need to bring myself to. But at the same time, I am in need in relationship with people, with whomever I encounter, to engage, the relationship. So I feel like I cannot live without, because that is also, the stage where I can feel myself being attached in relationship, engaging the relationship with others, whoever they are.
Anju, can I give you an analogy to answer this maybe? Otherwise, I don't want to sound like this preacher, who's very knowledgeable. And I will just give you an analogy. Think of a stage where a drama is being performed, like a theater where a drama is being performed. So as you said that when my inner self is trying to observe my outer self, maybe we could look at ourselves as puppets or as actors on that stage. You are one and I am one, and you and I right now as we speak, you and I are in a relationship. We are exchanging ideas. We are together on this platform. We are friends. We are colleagues. We are so many things with each other. So if I can see you as a puppet, along with myself as a puppet, then perhaps my witness consciousness will enable me to continue to relate with you without impinging on yourself and without you impinging on mine. And with the constant remembrance that at any point, my thread will be cut, just as your thread will be cut at any point. So I don't know if I'm able to answer this.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
The lesser said about this, the better, I think. If I say more, the impact of it will go.
Very good analogy. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Anju.
There are some questions in the chat.
Yes, Aziz, I can read the questions. Should I read them myself?
Yeah, the first two questions are related of the same issue about gurus. Yeah. Yeah, I can read it.
So Shivam,
First question from Shivam Tapa. I would like to know your thoughts on the culture of gurus and yoga classes around the world. Are they creating a wrong idea of yoga? Or do you think that these gurus have acted in the favor of yoga, preserving the ancient methods and practices that might have been lost to contemporary society? And the second question is actually also about guru. You mentioned that guru is not necessarily a person, but a principle. Is it a new interpretation or the ancient text mentioned so? The second
Both
question
are
from
connected to each other.
Sada on YouTube.
Yeah, both of them are kind of related to each other. So these are very good questions. Shivam, I would say that there has been more negative impact than positive impact by self-appointed gurus and yoga cults and yoga practices around the world, um, because and in this perhaps I'm answering the second question in a way. The texts, the ancient texts, neither do they mention that the guru is a principle, neither do they mention that the guru is a person. They mention guru as an integral part of this practice. It is only our experience which tells us, which will tell us, which will enable us to free ourselves from any kind of a bondage to a person. The texts do not say it, but our experiences will say this. In this way, I'm answering the second part of Shivam's question by saying that these have done more harm than good, because the gurus who propound systems and who establish these systems are unable to unattach themselves from their own personhoods. They are too busy seeing themselves as persons. The day a guru begins to see herself, himself, itself, or themselves as a principle, yoga or any other spiritual practice will have a serious impact. The guru also needs to know, also will realize that he or she or it is also a puppet, just as I am, just as you are. And the cord of this person will also be cut one day. And that is when the guru needs to be, the guru would naturally be ready for transforming onto a more wider dimension. But so long as there are gurus and there are cults and there are yoga schools and there are symbols and there are secret mantras and many of such things going on, we may be doing more harm, which doesn't exclude the fact that there are some, perhaps a handful of such gurus who are no longer persons but have merged to become principles. I don't know, Shivam. Are you here, Shivam?
Yes, ma'am.
I've been able to answer your question.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. But you see, I think I'll connect with one more question, which is there in the chat box, asking about different um, kinds of yoga and the differences between them. What I have observed is that the yogas which focus on physical activity are being promoted more than the yogas which tend to talk about the more the metaphysical aspects. And the current tradition is that these self-proclaimed teachers and gurus in these classes, they tend to quote out scripture and interpret scripture in their own manner and present it to the people, and spoon feed everyone about what is yoga and what are the different ways of yoga. And I believe but I do believe that there is a certain merit to that. At least we are preserving the scriptures and they won't get lost anytime soon, because they have turned into an economical asset of sorts for the modern generation.
You are right, Shiva. As they say, even bad publicity is good publicity. So, in some indirect way, perhaps the scriptures are being preserved, but it would be so much better if we were not scripturally obsessed and also physically obsessed, as you rightly said, the postures have become, so if we could kind of not quote from the scriptures, for with yoga for better hair or better skin or longevity or youth, then we would perhaps be doing a much more proper service to the text.
Okay. There are more questions on in the chat from Shubra. Please read out my question. Thank you for your illuminating talk, Namrata. Your paper has profound implications on the way we read Indian classical literature. Wondering what you would have to say about how compassion or lack of it could be used as a lens to read the Mahabharata. For instance, thank you. This is actually also a film series that is watched here in Indonesia.
This is also
A film series that is broadcast on our television here.
Mahabharata.
Yeah, Mahabharata.
Oh, wonderful. So there is the context for Mahabharata. I was wondering what to do with Shubra's question because I thought the context for Mahabharata would not be known. So the narrative is.
Yeah, we
Shubra,
know,
are you saying something?
we know, but about perhaps the names are quite different. Usually we call it Pandawa and Kurawa. Is that the same name? Yeah. So like Arjun, Yudhishthira, Nakula, Sadeva. Yeah. Yeah, we know that.
I have a feeling that Shubra wants to say something. Is it?
Shubra, do you want to say something on mic? Yeah, Shubra.
I think I heard her voice. She maybe.
No.
I think I heard her voice. No problem, Shubra. You can. No problem. You are most welcome to type. So this is I think this is a very good question. And I would say that this whole understanding of compassion as this moral compulsion is where we kind of misread the text. We keep asking this question whether the Kauravas were more wicked or were the Pandavas completely. We have this very limited narrative understanding of morality. So when I was very young, I remember once I was fighting with a group of children when I was very young, and I said, "You're all Kauravas, and I come to belong to the Pandavas." So I was very small, and I had a very simplistic understanding of morality, of someone being completely wrong and someone being completely right, and I thought I was a Pandava, and I kept laughing at those kids, calling them Kauravas. But unfortunately, I think I or the world has not grown up. We still have a very simplistic understanding of morally black and white, compartments. So Kauravas here, Pandavas there. But if we think about the Mahabharata, we should remember that Bhagavad Gita is also a part of the narrative of the Mahabharata. And Bhagavad Gita shows us the universal form of Krishna, who is the most compassionate self. And if you judge Krishna by his actions, you will not be able to make the statement. You will wonder, he made the war possible. For God's sake, how can he be compassionate? He was very cunning. He was very strategic. He made this entire Mahabharata possible. The war itself was made possible because of Krishna. Shubra again wants to say something. I keep hearing her voice. So Krishna made the war possible, yet he is the Godhead. He is the most compassionate one. So compassion would also mean maybe it.
No one.
So maybe it would bring us to this question from Galaxy M30 in an indirect way, maybe that compassion would in this case mean that you let the energies play themselves out. You let the drama play itself out. That's what Krishna did. Sometimes the drama needs to play out for a transformation to take place. Otherwise, we will only be talking about Kaurav or Pandav ideologies. Shubhra, I don't know if I've been able to answer that. I have a feeling that you constantly are trying to say something. Maybe add to it. If you can type, then maybe I could.
Shubhra said in the chat that too much noise around me. Sorry. So you can.
So, Shubhra, this is what I would say to this. Maybe if you want me to come back to this, I will come back to it in a bit.
Right. Okay. Another question from Galaxy M30.
From Galaxy
M30. Thank you for this comforting and essential talk on karuna. As I observe, enhancing one's consciousness is key to being a compassionate person. My question is, how can we develop karuna so that we remove ourselves from the act of compassion as an action or thought? Is there a possibility for an impersonal act of compassion?
Thank you for this question. And I think this is connected with what Anju had asked me. This question is very much connected to what Anju had asked me. And this is what I was trying to perhaps say in one of my slides in one of the later points. That compassion is not an emotion which is dependent on an experiencer, actor. Compassion is the natural state of the world. People dying is also an act of compassion. People being sick is also an act of compassion of the cosmic self. Sometimes, there's a wound and it needs to be something needs to be purged. So there will be a wound, and I need to press it for the pus to come out. So at that point, there's a lot of pain, but eventually it comes out. So at that point of time, obviously, I'm not. If you have a wound and can I start pressing it on you, it won't be a compassionate act in the way we see compassion as an actor and action. But if we see it as a process and we see this, eventually the pus will go out of your body. I may really hurt you in the process. You may hate me for it, but eventually your pus will go out. So puses need to go out. Wounds need to happen. Puses need to go out. There need to be doctors who will press it and hurt you. There will perhaps also be somebody who will give you the wound in the first place. So the Mahabharata needs to act itself out. So if we are able to experience this witness consciousness, I will not say if we are able to develop, because then again that would be a very egotistical thing to say. It's as if I can develop it. It's like making a cake, But if I can, if I'm graced with the ability to become a witness consciousness, certainly there is a possibility for myself to remove itself from action as well as thought, and I will cease to be an actor. And that's when the great cosmic music will start playing itself, with or without me. I will also understand my very small role in the larger scheme of things. It certainly is possible. Thank you very much for asking this question.
Yeah. Professor Norcott, you may turn on your mic.
Yep. Can you hear me? I'm using some Bluetooth speakers, but does it work?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good. So thank you so much. This is just an extraordinarily wise talk. It's going to sound perhaps, I don't want to sound conceited, but I have been living in a Hindu culture now for 9 months in Bali. In that time, I have become much more devoted to the practice of yoga. I didn't follow any particular class, but I've joined various classes in the time I've been here. But I've found now that I can't really live without it. And it's not only a physical practice, but also deep breathing and so on. I'm going to turn off my video, but I think the sound isn't so good. So I wonder whether, in fact, the guru is the practice. Can you hear my question?
Yes, Professor Northcott, I can.
Is the guru the practice more than anything else? Because I haven't had a guru, right? Mm-hmm. But I had this uncanny feeling when I watched your slides, because they described, well, it was quite strange because they described many things that have happened to me in the last 9 months inside me. And it was really almost uncanny when I watched your slides. So it's not so much a question as a comment, but I suppose it is a question, because it seems to me then that the guru, at least in my experience, is the practice. I mean, I've studied the Bhagavad Gita a little bit in the last 9 months, but I've not encountered, I've followed at various times a class here and there, but it's been more of an emphasis on the physical. But it seems to me that somehow this physical practice of yoga combined with deep breathing has led me to some of the things that you said without me being kind of aware that that was even what I was doing. So, of course, I know the word yoga encompasses a whole perspective, but I suppose you could say that the question then, if you practice yoga with enough passion and commitment, physical and spiritual, do these teachings come through that practice?
Professor Northcott, I think I've been able to hear 70% of what you said.
It's not a good connection, I'm sorry.
I I was able to hear the very beautiful point that you made, that the guru is the practice itself.
Yeah.
That I heard, that you said something about something uncanny that happened, which I could not hear.
I could repeat again. So when I started watching your slides, I found that many of the things that have happened to me internally in the last 9 months, living in Bali and practicing yoga quite with some commitment, were being described by your slides.
Okay.
And I found this uncanny.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm from a Christian tradition, so it's not like I was prepared for your slides.
Yes.
Except by the practice.
Mm-hmm. You are absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, it's not uncanny, but it's, I think, very, very canny, you know, because as they say about a guru also, when you are ready, the guru comes to you.
Yes,
and the guru certainly is not a principle, is not a person. The guru can be an experience. It can be multiple experiences. It is a principle of consciousness transforming itself. So, you know, what you said to me right now is also my guru. Maybe what I said to you is also a part of this whole principle of what it means to be, of what guru is. And the day we can free ourselves of this whole personhood of the guru, I think we are heading to some serious transformation. There is also, I don't know, sir, if you've been reading some of the scriptures and you have been reading about the ways in which guru is described as full guru and this kind of guru and that kind of guru. If you see the different ways in which the guru is described, you will also come across a term called swaguru. Swaguru would mean you are your own guru.
Yeah.
You know, and in answer to this, it's not an answer, since yours is not a question. Just another maybe like an illustration of this would be a small, beautiful incident that I know of from the life of this spiritual figure called Shirdi Sai Baba, who seems to be quite well known through the world. I do not know if you have heard his name. Sai Baba.
I've heard his name.
Heard his name? Shirdi Sai Baba. So there is a very beautiful anecdote that I learned when I was listening to another yogi who's recounted this beautiful incident in the teachings of Sai Baba, which is that there was a gathering, like a satsang, you know. Sai Baba used to sit under a tree and there were many people who would come to him for blessings. So there was a lady, there was a woman who was a very long-term devotee of Sai Baba. So one day she said to him that I want you to come to my house and I will prepare a dish for you. I will prepare a sweet dish for you, a milk porridge. He said, I want you to come to my place and I want to feed you. I want to offer you this, but I will not bring it here. I request you to grace my home, come to my home and eat this. He said, okay, today evening I will visit you. And she kept waiting for him all evening. He did not come. She prepared this. She was waiting with that sweet dish in her hands and she fell asleep. He did not come. A little later in the night, a cat came and licked the bowl. And she singed the cat with an iron rod. She singed the cat. And that this, I have prepared this for my guru and you have spoiled it now. What will I feed him? And then next morning, she went to Sai Baba very angry. And she said, I waited for you and you are a spiritual man and you lied to me. I am a poor woman. How I managed to cook for you and you never came. So he showed her his back and he said, why did you singe me? And that was the end of the whole discussion of, you know, the guru emanating in any particular form. He said, I came and I tasted it. It was very good. but you beat me. I will never come again. So
That's a,
she wanted him, but she was not ready for him.
Was that a true story?
It's believed to be a true story because the person who has narrated it, his very being is a credit. It's so credible that if he's narrating it, we know it's a true story. The guru will appear to you as a bird, as a dog. You need to be prepared. You need to be ready.
yes. Well, that's a great story. I just finished with one more little story. So I came to Bali from Jogja in the end of March 2020 because the lockdown was looking a bit fierce in my area, and I didn't know anybody there. My Bahasa was rubbish, and so I came to Bali, and I do know people here. And a few days after I arrived, I had a WhatsApp with actually Bernie Aidner Rusakota, who invited me originally to come here to work in ICRS. And yeah, it was a time of a big life choice for me, whether to go back to the UK or stay in Indonesia. And I felt guided to stay. But I commented to him something. I can't remember exactly what, but I'd met someone on the beach and this and that, and it seemed to be confirming my decision. And then Bernie said, "Oh," and I said, "I know what I said." I said to Bernie, "Maybe I find my guru in Bali." And he put it back to me and he said, "Your guru is yourself." And I thought it was a good answer, actually, because I didn't find a guru in Bali, but I found a practice, and that practice led me to new paths of the self, which I have honestly not experienced before. So anyway, mainly just to say thank you, because it's like you spoke to my soul. You told me things that I had discovered in words more clearly than I could articulate them myself. If you've ever written a book or an article, I need to follow. I want to follow it up because these were really extraordinary. This was to me. Well, I can only use the word uncanny again. Or in Indonesia, we talk about magic or that, but it was spine tingling when I started looking at your slides.
Thank you very much.
It was extraordinary. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Professor Michael Northcott. Thank you very much.
There was actually, if I could add to Prof. Northcott,
Yeah.
there was actually that I experienced Prof. Northcott with her. I spent like 10 days each year with her. Like the more I talk to her, I engage with her, the more I understand myself. I feel like that.
Anshu and I together were very blessed. Anshu, both of us were blessed together on that beautiful afternoon when Bapak was gracious enough to transfer his energy
From Sabto Dharma, yeah.
Yes, it was a beautiful experience that both of us could share together.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. But for me, it's different to your story because I've never met our teacher today before. And so she used these words that were so strikingly close to some of my experiences that it was uncanny. I mean, I've never met her before. And literally, I only just by chance got into WhatsApp. I just arrived back from Lombok to Bali and just chance looked at WhatsApp. Well, I don't even believe in chance anymore, to be honest. And clicked on it and found this talk. And then when I saw the slides, it was extraordinary. And so there's a degree of, magic in this. I hope I can meet you also.
I hope
Thank
so.
you.
I hope so too.
All right, we still have around 10 minutes. And so if you still have questions or comments, this is the last opportunity for you.
I do have one more comment, if I may. If there are no others, but if there are others, then I will hold it back.
Well, make it short, please.
The last slide. It's very relevant to ICRS and CRCS, and it's a profound challenge to us. I was for some years a director of a educational interdisciplinary graduate program in the United Kingdom. It was called Center for Human Ecology. And we had at the core of our practice, we had at the core of our practice transformation of self and society and earth. And when I think about ICRS and CRCS, if I'm not sure that we do have, and I wonder whether we should have. That's really my question. It's not directly direct to much to you. It's more a reflection because I actually feel really convicted by the talk, but also by my experiences in the last 9 months. If I'm to continue to be a teacher, it must be as someone who tries to help others also experience transformation.
Help others what? Sorry.
To experience transformation. Yeah. Not just critical thinking, but transformation.
Hmm. Do you have any idea like how to do it?
Well, in my class with Pak Zain this semester, I started sharing a few practices. So the first one I shared was deep breathing. Now, the Dalai Lama talks about the connection between learning to control our breath and deep breathing and the growth of compassion. So that was the first one. And the second one was going to nature on a regular basis and meditating. And the third one was eating clean. So that means no processed food, no food wrapped in plastic, not much meat, and mainly plants and fruits, which is close to um, a yogic diet. So I tried it. A few students commented, but at least I suppose I could say, even without thinking about it, I began to try to do it in one of my classes this semester. But it wasn't conscious. I mean, I didn't set out. Our lecturer has articulated, I suppose, what I was perhaps thinking I was trying to do, but I didn't set out to do it, if you see what I mean.
All right. Do you have something? You have something to say, Namrata?
No, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea, and more programs and more institutions would bring that together. I completely agree with the point he said about overemphasis of critical thinking, and that's a little point that I've also been trying to make, and I completely echo what he said. I have nothing more to add.
All right. Perhaps for the last question.
This is the poem that Tenzing wants to read out.
No, before that, from Dr. Priti Oza, he asked she asked the question, can you explain how all the yogas are different?
Hi, Preeti. Thank you very much. I will be very quick because we have very limited time. But I would I would like to say that yogas are not different. They are just different kinds of practices suited to different kinds of people. They are all the same thing. It is these practices are different according to our temperaments, and if I have taken to Raj Yoga, perhaps you may take to Bhakti Yoga. This will also be connected to karmas. So somebody has a more devotional temper, somebody has a very different kind of a temper. So I think yoga is one thing. There are no different kinds of yoga. There are different approaches to the act of union, to the act of balance, and they depend on your pravritti and my pravritti, and neither is your pravritti right and neither is mine right, and neither are they exclusive of each other. They will work in tandem, but we will take to the practices depending on our own baggages. That is one little answer I would like to give to this.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, the last comment is about Bhakti Yoga. Actually, the word Bhakti is also what? It's also in Indonesian. But we use the word Bhakti to mean something like be faithful to your parents.
To your?
To your parents.
Oh.
Or to your teacher. Guru means teacher also here in Indonesian. But I don't know about this teacher Adi Shankara. So I don't know about the form, but perhaps Yeah, you may comment one or two things about this
Yeah,
poem.
no, he's actually, Tenzin has just shared a poem that he wants to read. I think this poem highlights the importance of complete surrender. It
Mm,
highlights the importance, and I think he wants to read it. If your time permits, should we invite him to read it? I have nothing to say to this beautiful poem. Uh, just if your time permits, should we allow him and invite him to read this, or what should we do?
mm, where is
Tenzing, are you around?
are you here?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here, ma'am.
I think Tenzing, you're most welcome to read these beautiful lines.
Yes, ma'am. I didn't mean to disrespect anyone by sharing this poem, but I felt this could highlight the uh, bhakti yoga. So it goes like one's physique may be superb, one's consort likewise, one's reputation resplendent and renowned, and one's riches as high as Mount Meru. Yet if one's mind not be centered upon the lotus feet of the Guru, what then, what then, what then? Wife, wealth, sons, grandsons, and all such home and kindred, all these things may be there, yet if one's mind not be centered upon the lotus feet of the Guru, what then, what then, what then? The Vedas with the 6 limbs and the knowledge of all sciences may be on one's lips. One may possess the poetic gift and may compose fine prose and poetry, yet if one's mind not centered upon the lotus feet of the Guru, what then, what then, what then? I am honored in other lands and I am prosperous in my homeland. In the path of righteous conduct, there is none who surpasses me. Thus one may think. Yet if one's mind not be centered upon the lotus feet of the Guru, what then, what then, what then? One may be constantly extolled and one's presence highly honored by a host of emperors and the rulers of the world. Yet if one's mind not be centered upon the lotus feet of the Guru, what then, what then, what then? My repute has traveled in all directions through my philanthropy and profess. All the things of this world are in my hands as reward for my virtues. Yet if one's mind not be centered upon the lotus feet of the Guru, what then, what then, what then? The mind may have turned away from external delights through dispassion and from attainments like yoga and meditation, possessions like horses and the like, the enchanting face of the beloved, in short, the entire wealth of the earth, yet if one's mind not be centered upon the lotus feet of the Guru, what then, what then, what then? The mind may have lost its charm to live in forests, and likewise in the house, may have lost all desires to achieve whatever. Even the concerns for the body's welfare may have been outlived. Yet if one's mind not be centered upon the lotus feet of the Guru, what then? What then? What then? Thank you, ma'am.
So
Thank you, Tenzing.
beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for reading this. And you read it beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you, Tenzing.
Thank you, Tenzing, for reading the poem. Thank you, Namrata, for your lecture, and all the participants for bringing up questions and comments. Now that we are at 5 p.m. here in Western Indonesia, yeah, we cannot continue this event forever, right? And so we have to finish at this point. I'm going to stop the live stream on YouTube and we can chat more informally later. So thank you for all the people here. And for the next week, we still have one Wednesday forum, which will be the what the the conclusion or the end of this semester. And with the speaker Pak Iqbal Ahnaf, who is going to talk about the shifting patterns of radicalism in Indonesia. And we hope that we can see you again next week. Good afternoon. Thank you so much.